led by Jonathan Leek at University of Sheffield, but also Bangor University, Northwick and Loughborough, etc. And we're going to look at reintroduction of both herbal grazing leys and regular old-fashioned grass leys back into an arable rotation. So we're not looking to try and get our arable farmers over there in the east to convert back to livestock, but just to reintroduce a light touch use of these kind of leys into the system in order to see if we can address some of the real problematic soil quality issues that we're getting. You could say it's kind of a bit old hat, but I think it's a little bit different from what we've done in the past. And not only are we going to do this, but we're going to actually find out what happens as a result. So we're going to look at the soil structure and quality, a little bit the soil microbiology as far as we can, and we're going to look at the potential health benefits for sheep farmers who can introduce their animals to what would normally be a very low parasite load system, which they can bring their stock into more or less as sort of a mob grazing borrowed system, and then take them back to their own farms, so from potentially quite a healthy system. So it doesn't absolutely have to involve livestock farmers. We could also look into just introduce it as a soil improvement system, and then to mow the grass, which would either be taken to livestock farmers that are perhaps in neighbouring regions, or if all else fails, it could potentially go into an AD system. So we're just starting, and we are doing this in a participatory way because we want to be absolutely sure that it's going to be useful and acceptable and interesting to our farmer colleagues. So we have a number of farmers, 6 in total, that will work with us and will emulate the system that we're going to put on a NIAB farm. But we want to, right from early on in the project, to start talking to other farmers that aren't actually integrally part of the project, but to hear what you've got to say. If you're doing something similar, or would like to do something similar, or have lots of reasons why you think it's an appalling idea, we'd like to hear from you. So we will be getting in touch. If you know straight away that you'd like to be involved and interested and perhaps come to our workshops, then please get in touch with me. Again, my name's Lydia Smith at the National Institute of Agricultural Botany. You can find me on the web pages, or you can get in touch with Jonathan Leek, who is the official project leader. But either one will work, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in the future. And just before I give over to my friend Richard, who's going to talk about a subject very close to my heart, Sainfoin, which I've been working on for years, I'll pass around a few of these sort of handouts that I've prepared. So this is based on quite a bit of preparatory work that we've done both at NIAB and with our colleagues at Sheffield and elsewhere. And you can see on the top right of the handout there is again an indication of some of the soil issues that we're looking to deal with. A highly compacted, collapsed soil that might have been overworked, particularly if it's got low organic matter, and introduction of these more complex rooting systems. This is why we're looking at not just a grass ley system, but a complex herbal ley where you've got potentially a lot of different root types, potential soil health improvement. So one of the questions is also, is the difference if you push it up to 3 years?
Oh, wait, I think the other one might not turn on. They do. They
don't like each other.
Do we need to play on for this grass then?
Do you need to? Oh, good, very good question. So the gentleman said, do we need to plough after this grass? So not only are we going to be looking at introduction of this into the system, but we're going to look at either going back to whatever your tillage system of preference is, so that could be ploughing, or preferably to look at whether a no-till direct drill will actually keep a lot of those improvements that we've introduced back into the soil. So if you look at the front, depending on your point of view, of if you look at this side of my handout, you can see our sort of system. So we're going to start off with the herbal ley or the grass ley, which will graze or mow, and then at the end of the experiment, so the grazed box, you can see that we'll be looking at no-till or traditional tillage, and that could be whatever you want, and depending on what the farmers decide, those that are working with us, we will be looking at plough or perhaps one of the other alternatives like non-inversion tillage of some description. Any other questions? Thank you for that. I missed that fairly major part of what I wanted to say.
I see you using glyphosate then to get rid of to spray the grass up.
Again, not necessarily, because what we want to do is to work with what the farmers want to do. We have one organic farmer in our set, and they don't want to use glyphosate.
I'd say when we started that trial up where I showed you the organic
Yes.
and you start on an uphill battle if you don't spray. You know, obviously you can't if you're organic,
Yeah.
and it didn't really stand much of a chance to win from that point.
May well be so. It's pretty much aimed at a conventional farmer, it must be said, and it's those systems which are more likely. I'm not saying anything deleterious about conventional versus organic, but it may be that some farmers in the east may have suffered from some soil issues that's slightly less likely under an organic system. Keeping very much on the fence then. Well done.
Richard.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I manage just under 6,000 acres organically, 2,750 here in the Cotswolds and just over 3,000 up in Staffordshire. My great challenge in life is to produce as much red meat and dairy product, milk, as I can from that 6,000 acres for the Daylesford brand. I get excited about lots of things in organic agriculture, and I think our farms perform very, very well. Cereals are at a minimum now because grass and grazing ley and forage crops are what I'm about really. So we're really only ploughing up exhausted grass leys or where we've knackered them up, and then taking the cereal crop really to break rotation and get it back into grass again. But one of the things I get really excited about, or got fairly interested in some years ago, was Sainfoin. Anybody that follows the agroecology website will see me sort of giving video blogs of information about Sainfoin. So I'd read about it, decided that it was a fairly viable crop, but the main reason I got interested was that I read that 20 to 25% of the Cotswolds 100 years ago was covered in Sainfoin. So it's pretty easy, and it is for me to decide that this area is a good place to grow Sainfoin. And you grew 20% of your farm to Sainfoin because it took 25% of the land mass of your farm to grow the energy to feed the horses. So it was found to be the ultimate horse hay. Proteins within it broke down well within the horse's gut. So got very interested, read a bit further, and then discovered that Sainfoin was grown for the first time ever in 1852 at Daylesford. I get very excited about marketing our business, and I thought, what better marketing story than to regrow Sainfoin? So there's a little 5-acre patch that came into the rotation, Cotswold brash. You need a nice pH, high pH in the soil, and free draining, I had read. So a little 5-acre piece came up, and I put this Sainfoin in. You establish it in warm soils. The biggest headache with Sainfoin is establishment. So ploughed it, drilled it in about an inch deep, rolled it in really tightly in mid-May. You need to put it into warm soils. And of course, if you don't get a lot of moisture, it'll just sit there. And I remember by the September thinking, well, this is about as much use as the Pope's testicles, because this has done nothing. Anyway, a bit of rubbish came up. I also just put about 10 kilos per hectare of traditional grass seed on top, sprinkled it on and rolled it in, just to keep the weed burden at bay and to put the soil into a bit of darkness. Went through the winter. The following year, there was a phenomenal crop of Sainfoin, and we measured it very carefully. I had read that the best time to mow it was mid-flowering, sort of second half of flowering, so I left it. It was as high as the bonnet on the tractor, and we mowed it, and we took 15 tons to the acre, 37.5 tons of fresh weight Sainfoin silage per hectare. which was phenomenal, and that's really important to me. I want bulk of forage. I need to fill. We've got 1,000 head of cattle, thousands of sheep, dairy, and it's all about mouths and feeding and quality forage. So that was really important to me. I also supplied to the business at between 150 to 200 fat lambs a week. And so for me to be able to provide those 52 weeks of the year is a huge challenge. So I'm always looking for forages that ruminants can perform well on. So I can put lambs onto Sainfoin at the end of September into October, and now gain 300 to 350 grams a day live weight gain. So I can put them on in batches of 600 on blocks into Sainfoin and watch them grow. Now, the thing you need to be careful with about Sainfoin is that it's a crown-grown plant. If you chew the crown out, you lose the plant, so you need to graze it very carefully. You also grow a lot of red clover, and I fatten a lot of lambs on red clover also. More interestingly, when analysed, so we grow a lot of red clover and ryegrass, and the reason I put ryegrass in the red clover is because when you put lambs onto graze, they actually find the red clover fairly unpalatable. They don't enjoy it. A little bit of ryegrass in there, and I'll nip through and eat all the ryegrass off whilst taking a little bit of red clover, and they'll come back across it and eat the next species. Then they'll get onto the red clover, and you've trained your animal to grow the bacteria within the gut to break it down. And I've never lost a lamb in tens of thousands of lambs. I've never lost a lamb to bloat. I've lost a few to red gut, but now we're on to red clover, so I'll get back to Sainfoin. When we analysed the Sainfoin and it came in, it would have had a protein content of about 16% with an ME of about 11. Well, when you look at an ME score on an analysed sheet, 10 is poor, 10.5 is pretty average, okay, and 11 is good. So there was my ME of 11. I look at 3 elements on that analysis: the DM, the protein, and the ME, the energy that the animal can actually extract from it. It's much more complicated than that, but that's the 3 elements that I want to look at. This year, and we've grown it now for about 8 years, great advantage of Sainfoin is that if you look after it, it can be an 8-year lay. For your establishment year, there's no cash crop, but you do get this 8-year lay if you look after it. It's leguminous, it fixes a huge amount of nitrogen, it's very good at weed suppressing, so it's a very, very clean crop. It's an anthelmintic, and it's drought resistant. So you're now saying, well, if it's that bloody good, why aren't we all growing it? Well, it's because of this establishment and the lack of a cash crop in the year of establishment. 2 years ago I established 100 acres, and it was a very wet summer, and we actually cut a crop off it at the end of September. The seed is expensive. One of the great rip-offs in organic farming is seed. Yeah? Don't cost any more or less to produce it. They charge us 3 times the price for it, and it really annoys me. So I decided I was going to conserve my own seed, both in clovers and Sainfoin. Sainfoin's very easily combined. The seed sticks right up above, it's on the outside of the pod, it sticks above the crop, so you're not taking any greenery in the combine. Fly through it at 14k an hour. Who cares if you're throwing a bit over the back? If you get a good crop, you'll get 150 kilograms an acre. That's exactly what I was told I was getting. That's what I got. So we now conserve all of our own seed. Now, back to this analysis. So this year, and we didn't know it was going to be a drought because we had a hellish wet late winter in spring, didn't we? And then spring all of a sudden came to a burst, and the Sainfoin got away, and it got up to about 18 inches high, so quite a juvenile, soft plant. And we decided to mow 100 acres of it. So on the 14th of May, in an organic system, we mowed the Sainfoin, and I reckon we took about 8 tonnes to the acre fresh weight silage. But we analysed it as a juvenile standing crop, and it analysed at 22% protein. Then we analysed it 10 days later, and it was at 20% protein. And when we mowed it, I reckon that's going to come in at about 18% protein. I was hoping to have the analysis with me today, but I don't. So that's going to come in at about 18% protein. Now, for me, it's about like talking to a vet. You know, I can say these sheep just aren't blue, what's wrong with them? Take the blood test, they take the blood test, they come back, they say, well, all the base elements and minerals are within the parameters where they should be. I can still see the bloody sheep isn't blooming. Well, it's about the same with an analysis when you look at it. You judge your stock on how they perform. We milk a herd of pedigree Friesians, and I've now got enough silage to put control groups in the dairy to feed just Sainfoin, and the performance is phenomenal. So our cows are averaging about 6,800 litres and 4,300 coming from forage, which is a very pleasing statistic in an organic system. So Sainfoin, I can't emphasise enough, has been a wonderful crop for us in the sense that it fixes this tremendous amount of nitrogen. It's very clean, it suppresses weeds, and you get bulk of feed, and it's a long-term lay. We're making the best of both worlds by fattening lambs from aftermaths and so on Sainfoin, but you do need to be careful when grazing it. And it's certainly a crop that's going to stay in our rotation for the foreseeable future, because I can't see anything that would beat it from an organics performance point of view. I entertain hundreds, if not thousands, of farmers that come to Daylesford, mainly to be nosy because it's owned by a very successful family, or the second reason would be to mock and ridicule what it is we do as organic farmers. When I've got them around and shown them prize-winning show stock that have been reared solely on forage-based diets, and mainly this golden tool, which is Sainfoin, I can tell you they've shut up and started to listen. Yeah? And they'll mob you for information on how you manage to do it. But the establishment is the important bit. Can't knock it, going to keep growing it, and that's just practical advice. Thank you.
Can I just add something?
Absolutely.
We discovered that we've had a mutual love of Sainfoin, and
Sainfoin.
I've worked on it for about 10 years. We put together a grower's guide which you can download from the Cotswold Seeds site. Having talked to Richard for only 10 minutes, I can see we need to update it considerably with some of his knowledge. But as a starter, you might find that useful, and it gives you a few of those care points that Richard has said, like be very careful about the establishment phase. That can be tricky.
There certainly is loads on Sainfoin on agroecology. So
Yes, I've done a lot on agroecology. I get the
put the
pleasure of
word
putting
in
a
the
vlog
box,
on there once
and there's
a
a
month,
lot.
and Sainfoin's always
Not
my
all from
favourite one,
Richard.
because I like to show everybody the different stages at which it grows. But you have a think about it in very simple terms. We're monogastrics, we're feeding a ruminant. If they fed it to horses, so there are specialist customers for Sainfoin, racehorse trainers, owners, and zoos. The giraffes and rhinos and specialist stomachs do very well on Sainfoin because the proteins within it will break down beautifully. There's nothing more sensitive than a horse's stomach. If we're monogastrics and a beast is a ruminant, what's a horse? It's actually quite closely related to a rabbit. He's a rear hind fermenter. And he will process very badly or very efficiently protein, and that protein breaks down very efficiently in the horse's stomach. So I'm looking for this superior quality forage to feed to ruminants, and we show a lot of stock, and it all gets fed on Sainfoin, and they bloom beautifully, and it's a natural and fermenting.
Good, thank you. Any other questions whilst we're,
Obvious one, I guess, is how does it cope with the weather? Does that even matter?
The weather? So the winter, you mean? How does it winter?
No, I mean like the climate now. Hot
Oh,
and
okay.
dry.
Well, one of the great advantages is it's drought resistant.
Right.
If we went to an established Sainfoin lane now, and I got a JCB and I dug a trench down, they reckoned I could find hair roots 20 feet down. Yeah. And a lot about feeding stock successfully is about minerals in the subsoil, not just in the topsoil. That's why herbal lays and diverse lays will always be healthier generally across the board for your livestock than a very modern ryegrass clover lay.
Right.
So Sainfoin wins on all counts. You can tell a lot about a farm by the amount of minerals that you use to keep your sheep or cattle healthy. And very little mineral is used in our sheep and cattle.
Okay. And it's a buzzy feed, isn't it?
And then I haven't mentioned actually, which Tim will be annoyed with me about, but it's a tremendous crop for your bees, that ecosystem. It's fantastic.
It's got a very, if you're cutting it with flower and you get that second bloom in September, that late flowering is tremendous for me. Just when they're getting hungry.
Yeah.
But don't even think about it if your soil pH is less than 6 or is waterlogged.
Yeah, you need a fairly good pH soil, and I've had people ring me from all over the country, from north of Scotland down to Cornwall, saying, "Can I grow Sainfoin on my farm?" Well, the answer is yes. You just need the right soil type. Free draining with a reasonably high pH.
This year you cut it earlier, you said.
We did.
Do you think that's going to be detrimental to it? Because I know it's told not to cut it
Right, now you make a very good point. Now I haven't told you that I actually got bullied a bit by the farm workers because they wanted to start silaging. And I was a bit grumpy about it. I'll tell you what it was, we got a new set of triple mowers and they wanted to go and have a play with them, that's what it was. And anyway, they went and mowed this, they were beautiful stuff. We've had a second cut from that, I haven't told you that. We've taken a further 5 tonnes to the acre from a second cut. Yes, every year. So 2 cuts, then to an aftermath. The trick is as well not to mow it too low because of that crown. Yes, that's what we would do. So we'd have the combine in there at sort of the end of September, October, and a nice sunny dry day and just take the seed off it. And it's very easily combined. So it doesn't please the seed merchant at all.
Good, thank you very much.
What was the companion plant?
So the companion plant would just be a traditional sort of grass lay, a fairly unproductive grass that you would put on at about 10 kilos a hectare at the same time as you drill it, sprinkle it in and roll it in. And what that will do is it will create a little bit of a lag just to suppress any weeds whilst your troublesome sainfoin is establishing itself. When I say it's troublesome, you might not see a lot in the first year, but the second year is when it comes into its own.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard and Lydia. Right, we're going to jump back onto the trailers now. Just wanted to point out as you got by, this was drilled with a seed hawk, so straight in with a seed hawk as a direct drill. Quite late.